3, 2, 1.
Seja bem-vindo e bem-vinda ao nosso canal.
Welcome to our channel, ladies and gentlemen. This event is organized by the UNESCO office in Brazil. It will approach some relevant matters to everyone, and it will cover one of the 5 areas of the UNESCO administration, including education, natural sciences, human and social sciences, culture, communication, and information. However, we hereby point out that names and the presentation of the material throughout this event do not imply any manifestation of opinion from UNESCO with regards to the legal situation of any country, territory, city, region of its authorities, nor does it comment on the limits and boundaries of those countries. So therefore, the opinions hereby expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of UNESCO's, nor do they compromise the organization. Keep tabs on the channels of UNESCO for other events and actions of this organization. Hello, good morning. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the YouTube channel of UNESCO in Brazil to participate on the launch of our publication, School Leadership Principles as Key Factors for Transforming Education in Brazil. I am Rebecca Otero. I am the coordinator for the education sector of UNESCO in Brazil, and I will be with you throughout this entire virtual event, which will last for 2 hours. The objective is to disseminate this important study and to foster the debate about the role of school principals to achieve inclusive, equitable, and quality education. The event has simultaneous interpretation, and you may watch it in Portuguese or in English. Suffice it to access the room, the YouTube room, which the link is on the description of this video. So the elaboration of that publication, School Leadership Principles as Key Factors for Transforming Education in Brazil, has been made possible thanks to the collaboration of different professionals from national and international institutions. In this sense, I would like to mention Fundação Getúlio Vargas, the Business School Management, which provided us with support on the chapter on Brazil, and Diego Portales University, UDP, which supported the development of this book since its inception. The topic of school leadership on the educational front is of the utmost importance because the leadership of principals has been considered as a key factor to improve the educational quality in the country. For this reason, for decades, research has strove to get to know more about school principals, thus providing a vast and wealth body of knowledge in this regard. Thus, we are very happy to launch this publication with the objective to, once again, disseminate information between school administrators, principals, teachers, and other educational professionals with this important knowledge. At this moment, I would like to invite and give a warm welcome to the director and representative of UNESCO in Brazil, Marlova Noleto. Marlova, you have the floor. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to our colleagues, to all of our listeners, all of you that are joining us via YouTube. It is a pleasure to us to host this event and to be together here to reflect and debate on the important role that school principals and leaders have in order for us to be able to ensure an inclusive, equitable, and high-quality education, as it is the objective, as it is in line with the 4th Sustainable Development Goal. And so I would very much like to start by greeting my dear friend, José Henrique Paim. professor at the Brazilian School of Public and Business Management, EBAP, and also the director of the Center for Development of Public Management and Educational Policies, DGPE. I would like to greet our Basic Education Secretary from the Ministry of Education, our dear partner, Katia Schweikart. I hope I got the pronunciation right, Katia. You know, throughout my whole life, I had colleagues that struggled with my name, which is Jacques Chelovit. And so people will rather call me by my last surname, Noleto. So I would like to greet Katia and acknowledge this partnership between the Ministry of Education and UNESCO so we can achieve high quality education for everyone. And I would like also to greet all of our speakers that are a part of this panel. My dear Secretary Teixeira from Rio Grande do Sul, my colleague Rebecca. I would like to greet all the authors of this publication. And I want to say that this is a moment that for us, more so than ever, we need to discuss the important role of school principals at this moment. As we discuss the role of school principals, I would also like to greet all of you who are joining us on our YouTube channel. And additionally, I would like to emphasize just how important it is for us to create a forum for discussion, for interaction. We have reached out to a greater number of people thanks to the advent of technology. And additionally, together, we can make strides, we can progress this agenda, which is the inclusion agenda, the quality education agenda. And also, we underscore just how important it is the role that educators play, as well as school administrators, for the overall education process. More and more, we recognize the role of good school leaders as a powerful force that is capable of transforming the quality of education and also capable of having a positive influence on the collective effort which is undertaken day in and day out on basic education with the aim of training or of educating our new generations. And more so than ever, again, we need critical minds for times that are also critical. Strengthening school leaders in order to improve learning and to improve education is one of such strategies that are presented on one of the goals of the education agenda for 2030. And this goal tackles precisely the necessity to have more and more qualified teachers and how we can work together to focus on this training to increase qualification, and how can we actually build or create new ways for us to be able to support and really to allow for a good educational environment to where our leaders are in a position to develop their full potential. Us, on the national level, we know that more and more we are expanding knowledge. We have more and more studies about educational leaders. And here in Brazil, we need to strive to fill this gap. Therefore, the objective in launching this book is precisely to make this knowledge available for principals, members of academia, and educators in general, a set of knowledge that is up to date with regards to the key core issues about school leadership. So today we have a group of 10 renowned members of academia. They are going to participate in they were a part actually of this collective effort, this publication. Many of them are here present as speakers in this event. They are going to share their ideas, share their proposals. And we know for a fact that Brazil has faced quite the challenge because of the uncertainty came from the violent attacks that we saw recently in some of our schools. And I always like to emphasize that for UNESCO, schools are a sacred territory, is a space for learning, and therefore it should be a safe space. And learning and education should be an organized process based on the 4 principles that we mentioned. And more so than ever, we have to focus on 2 of those principles, which is learning to be and learning to coexist. And we cannot forget that in schools, which is, again, sacred territory, children and youths have to develop their full potential to make sure that they can be everything that they can be in their entirety. And it's also in our schools that we learn to live together, to coexist, to respect diversity, to respect our differences, and to open ourselves up to respect other people. So more and more, and of course, not to mention the importance of learning to know and learning to do. And of course, for this reason, events like this one, they put us in a position and they bring us back to this development, to this commitment, which is to make sure that every child, every youth, every adolescent, every student can achieve their full potential. And making sure that schools and educational spaces can also be more and more our safe space. They can be learning spaces, socialization spaces, and never a platform for hate and violence. Creating a peaceful culture has education as a bedrock, and therefore it should really penetrate all the practices of teaching and involve all the school community and beyond the school community, to the vicinities, our government members, the professionals that work in the educational process. And we are faced with this challenge. Therefore, creating a peaceful culture in our schools is a common task, is a task that we all share. And school leaders also play a key role in this process. And so I just want to emphasize how joyful we are in releasing this book and promoting this debate. I also want to underscore the key role that principals play in our schools. They are out there on a daily basis, striving to provide a quality education to all children and youths. In this week, we are celebrating Education Day, April 28th. And this is also an important way for us to celebrate the Education Day by sharing knowledge, by fostering a debate, which is really important, by recognizing the roles of our school leaders in improving the quality of our education, and reinstating our commitment with the essential right, which is to have an education. And I remind you that this is a right that provides access to all the other rights. And it's also the driving force for a fair society, for a more resilient, inclusive, and democratic society. We emphasize the commitment of the UN and UNESCO to not leave any child behind. Quality education for everyone. And happy 28th of April in advance, the Day of Education. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Marlova. We also thank all of you for being here. We have almost 140 people attending, 140 spectators, and we hope that more will join us. So at this moment, I would like to hand it over to Secretary Katja Swikart, this National Secretary for Basic Education in the Ministry of Education. She was kind enough to join us, even though she has a very hectic schedule, without question. Katja is a full professor of the Federal University of Amazonas. She was a municipal secretary of the environment between 2013 and 2015, and also the municipal secretary for education in the city of Manaus between 2015 and 20. Currently, she is the basic education secretary for the Ministry of Education, and she was awarded with the Inês de Vasconcelos Medal in 2020, thanks to the services she provided to public education. And she was recognized with the Public Spirit Award in 2020, also as a highlight on education. Katja, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Rebecca. A very good morning to Marlova and Rebecca and everyone at UNESCO. Thank you so much for the invitation, for the partnership with the Ministry of Education. Without this partnership, I think many of our initiatives would not be possible. It wouldn't be possible for us to reinstate the Ministry of Education at this point. So thank you so much, Professor Enrique Pain. I greet you as well. She is also a very great partner here at the Ministry of Education. What we see right now is really credit to a lot of his administration. My friend Laura from FGV. We have done so many projects to benefit education. And especially, it's great to see just how powerful Brazilian education is and can be, and the role that it plays to provide transformative processes and more inclusion and equity. And I also greet all of my colleagues here that are attending. And I start by apologizing because at 10 a.m. there was a meeting and I actually asked to be attending this event with you folks. And I had to be a little behind, so I'm staying with you for a while, but I have to leave for another meeting. And I do apologize because I would love to attend this event in its entirety, to listen to all of the discussions, because I think this is really a watershed. It's a very important moment. And I want to start by saying, not from a Ministry of Education's perspective, because I've been here for a short time, but really as a manager of a municipal educational network. And I think that throughout my whole career as a teacher myself, as a researcher, and as a public official, these years that I worked on the Secretariat of Education or the Bureau of Education, those were the years where I could really get qualified as a public official, and where I learned the most to deal with challenges and really to understand how important our leadership is, whether it's managing the network and school managers to do the transformations that we need, but also the transformations in the right direction, guaranteeing the basic rights for children and youths, which I think that's what public policies are there for, and what public education or educational policies are there for, but also to acknowledge the power and the qualification of our educational professionals, whether they are school administrators, pedagogical coordinators, the entire school community, which they are the real mediators of that process. So children, adolescents, and youths, in order for them to learn and produce knowledge in good quality, in order for them to have that right upheld, they need to have good educational environments. They need to have significant educational environments. And in this sense, school administrators make the difference. And, you know, I was so joyful to see this publication, and especially with the invite to be a part of this discussion. And I just want to reinstate how important this is. This is really key for the entire education ecosystem in Brazil. On the same token, I do recognize the importance of this professional, school managers, and for the significant learning processes in schools, especially schools that are more vulnerable. Because when I was a secretary in the city of Manaus, northern Brazil, that's something that really jumped to my attention. I remember that right at the beginning in 2015, we did a quick survey because the Manaus network is quite big. It's hundreds of schools and thousands of students. So 500 school principals that were split up in 7 districts. And each of them had roughly 56 to 70 administrators working. And all the meetings at that beginning, when we first started, all the meetings for maybe 2 years, they were dealing with issues that were related to the infrastructure of those schools and the school meals and the difficulty there was to manage those issues. And those were the ones that were the most pressing. They were more perceived by society as limiting factors for the educational process. And that was not only when I would meet with the teachers, but also when I would meet with politicians, with councilmen and women, when parents reached out to me, or even the teachers themselves. And so I started participating on the meetings of those districts and the agenda of those meetings. They would gather every month, right? The different districts. So you had a coordinator for each district, and all the administrators on the district got together, and they had a very dense agenda, very much focused on those issues. So there was no room in the administrator's agenda for speaking about how children were not learning, or the main limiting factors for the learning process. What were some of the difficulties that teachers were facing to perform their jobs? And so they were also dealing with something that was very, very pressing, very significant. There was an excessive number of leaves from the teacher side as well. There were some problems with the school meals and the school administration, and also there were some issues related to teachers abstaining, or some relationships they had with the union back and forth, and nobody knew exactly what was the mission of the Secretariat of the Bureau of Education and what were their roles as teachers. Therefore, at that first moment, what we had to do was draw a diagnosis of what were our main bottlenecks. And what we saw was that there were many variables that really compromised the learning processes in those 500 schools at the time. And we mapped out maybe 10 variables. Of course, school meals, of course, infrastructure, of course, teacher allocation, of course, school materials and the relationships with the communities, the vulnerability and the violence that was present in the schools as well. So that situation, Manaus had 253 schools at the time in neighborhoods that were very violent. So those schools had to really deal with the surrounding community as a whole. But out of all those variables, for example, there were leased buildings. There was a discussion among those 500 schools. 360 were their own buildings, and the remainder were leases. And there was an issue because people spoke about the leases as being a problem. These buildings were not fit to be, the school ground. And from all of those variables that were sometimes present at the media and really in the discourse of the school community and the school administrators themselves, we understood that from a school performance perspective, all of those variables had an impact, but there was one issue that was invariable. If the school was a lease, if the infrastructure was poor, when all those problems were present, and when the administrators were good, when they were well trained, when the school managers were good at their jobs, those students still had a good performance. And from the teacher side, the teachers really liked working at that school, and they were highly committed with their jobs. So at the time, that was around 2015 or 16, it really drew my attention that that was an asset that we had to keep a close watch on. And then, of course, we understood the situation, we participated in discussions, and we realized that there is evidence in the literature that points to that direction. However, and this is a fact, in Brazil, we still have roughly 43%, and I think that publication it comes in a great timing, because 43% are not yet picked thanks to their quality, their technical qualities, not only technical qualities, but really the skills of good leaders are multiple. And a lot of them can be learned, by the way. I believe that I learned a lot on the job. There is no course for you to be a municipal secretary or a public official. What we do is we learn as we go. and we learn from the dynamics. And of course, we connect that. Well, of course, training is the best scenario. But it really became clear to me that we actually had to have a different perspective when we assessed this segment, this group. And I think the discussion that you are bringing forth can really have some important contributions for us to have that turnaround. Evidently, the international experience is very much inspiring. The United States is a different situation. Europe has its own situation. And I believe that the experiences in Latin America is also its own situation, and maybe it's closer to our reality. Based on my experience, I don't see a great deal of separation. Not that I don't see it, but I really cannot fathom that you have more or less importance between technical skills, preparation, and political skills. Here in Brazil, I am of the opinion that those elements need to be well balanced. And I see this in the Ministry of Education. I see different realities here, different than the one that I've experienced. And I think that we really have to be attentive because Brazil has a certain cultural situation. We've had a certain trajectory in this country from a public administration perspective, which is very particular. And also, as an administrator myself, for 2 years, in those 2 years that I was very impacted by those issues that I consider to be less impactful from an education perspective, because infrastructure was really at the top of the agenda. School meals were at the top of the agenda. And we couldn't really set goals for children's learning despite the difficulties and strike a balance in these discussions. And I felt as though that agenda from the councilman that was much less focused on learning was a lesser impact. And I understood subsequently that the political representation in segments that a lot of times I would not consider because I was someone that got there for a technical skill. And this is very challenging if you don't have a dialogue with those segments, because they really represent a very important segment of society. And we were not in a position to guarantee sustainability for our administration if we didn't have a dialogue with these folks and if we didn't understand what they were trying to communicate with the demands that they presented and the indications that they presented. So in this process, here's what we were able to do. First of all, we strengthened our experiences on some schools that started changing their perspective and their organization, focusing more on a complete or comprehensive education to where teachers became more of an agent along with their team, and they connected with the community in a different way. They created a strategic plan, and they connected with the school community to really determine what were the goals that were necessary, what they were trying to achieve. And the Bureau as a whole made this happen.
Furthermore, something I thought was very important at the time was the ability that we developed to, little by little, progressively engage in a dialogue with the politicians. At that point in time, I already had a previous experience of directly electing school managers, which had not proved very successful, because election of school managers was more or less comparable to the election for city council man. There was a major electoral campaign for certain school managers, and there were not, say, minimum criteria for them to be eligible to the position of school managers. So what we did at the time, we found a pathway to strike a balance between the, say, tentative appointment and technical selection of the relevant people to be further confirmed by the community. That was the, say, best arrangement we came up with. And following that experience and effort, we worked hand in hand with them and managed to ensure that in the school managers meetings with the coordination staff, they could strike a better balance and realize what their actual role was in terms of spearheading leadership and processes underway in the school setting to cover any shortcomings in their background, which at times involve technical background and training for financial management and conflict mediation, and to engage in a dialogue with the community members and the Secretariat of or Bureau of Education. However, they did have shortcomings in their background training to lead processes involving pedagogy issues in the school setting. Up until then, they didn't really realize that that was part and parcel of their role and function. So yes, I believe that the discussions that are triggered through the publication can serve as a tremendous source of inspiration for so many issues of interest. Just a few minutes ago, we heard Moralova talk about the situation we are currently or have currently experienced with the recent attacks in Brazilian schools. And I think we must connect, of course, the role of school managers in that situation. And I think it has to do with the very definition of the school setting, because we believe it is supposed by all of us to be perceived as a sacred environment, yes, but in my view, it is not a sacred environment for the sake of itself, but rather a sacred environment in that it is a special space or forum for connection between young people, children, and the community around them. In that sense, the school is the agent of so many initiatives in the overall territory. So school leaders shouldn't just work internally or inwardly, but rather outwardly. They should understand the meaning and the purpose. They thorny and intractable problems of those underprivileged. And school managers, end up espousing a medium kind of behavior, unable to actually provide for those who actually need them. So the school managers are an important figure because they spearhead leadership for in-house processes in the school setting, but they also serve as an important bridge to lead processes outside of the school setting. In that sense, quality, all of that will be reflected in all of the processes underway within the school setting. This country, folks, is an unequal, racist, violent country. It is a misrepresentation to say that this is a harmonious, socially harmonious country. I mean, all 72% are black. 70% of the Brazilian prison population are black as well. So you have to consider all of the should work according to that perspective. All of that is part of their background and training. So they must be aware of all of these dimensions, skills, and competencies, which provides us with that novelty element from a technical perspective. And I think it can pretty much talk to the current reality in Brazil, considering its structure and complexity thereof, as well as the paternalistic vision that prevails in the Brazilian state apparatus. And it will help us align technical competence and political skillfulness or tactfulness to ensure that we materialize one's right to education that will be transformative and significant for young people, children, teachers, and much for bearing with me as well. Thank you, Katia, Secretary Katia, for sharing all the wealth of information you have in your country fellow person, Marlova Noleto. I hope I have not mispronounced her name. And I'd also like to extend my greetings to Secretary of Primary Education, Katia, Professor Katia, who has indeed made or has been making a great effort to rebuild the Ministry of Education as regards primary education initiatives. Greetings likewise to Rebecca. And in so doing, may I also greet Lara Semieli, our dear friend and partner with the Getulio Vargas Foundation. And through you, may I extend my greetings to all of the subject matter experts and researchers who have taken part in the initiative at hand. An extremely important and rich initiative in that it can serve as a source of inspiration for minds and hearts throughout Brazil, so that we can indeed turn the page in our educational system. The Brazilian education system, unfortunately, is not covered by enabling legislation as it should be, and that is why we have made so many efforts and have so much talked about our need to pass the enabling legislation for the national education system, which remains very centralized and a very complex system, while of course extremely unequal. It is extremely important that the education system be able to foster a very important change, i.e., introduce in school management the unique features of a learning-oriented management style. It is a key element, learning plus inclusion, because of course one cannot possibly talk about learning, student learning, without of course bearing in mind the importance of inclusion, social inclusion, especially in a country like ours. So I think it is fair to say that talking about school leadership means a great deal given the effort we must undertake to that effect. And yes, I think it should indeed be one of our main strategies to help us turn the page and move towards a major turnaround to actually change education in Brazil. We know just how important the school principal is. I mean, several examples and studies are available, including in the technical literature, providing evidence from the theory of efficacy, studies showing evidence that principals leadership makes a big difference. But more than that, we must ensure that principals and their leadership will irradiate and trickle down in such a way that they not be just personal examples, one-off examples here and there, but rather that they can be replicated throughout the education system. Hence, the importance of empowering school principals. In Brazil, in particular, we have this culture out there where very often the school principal's ability is underestimated. And the fact is that school principals have a wide array of responsibilities in their hands, which include not only the allocation of personnel or staff members and the selection of teachers to teach each class in each grade, etc. But very often we may find ourselves thinking that school principals are unable to manage their own budget appropriations and make the decisions that are required to ensure that their school will work in such a way as to prioritize learning in its strategy. Furthermore, we often underestimate school principals and do not think they're actually capable of taking on the responsibility for actually monitoring the learning process and foster a learning monitoring culture within the school, which we know is a unique and very special feature that is required for us to indeed change education in Brazil. So the publication at hand, in my view, can prove to be a determining factor, really, because following all of the accounts and experience that are reported on in the publication from different geographies worldwide, we hope and trust that we will be able to bring all of that information and bring it to bear and bring it to light in the eyes of our researchers, teachers, and subject matter experts, so that in the foreseeable future, we be in a position to put in place strategic initiatives to that effect. We're currently going through a rather difficult period in time. We went through four, say, shady, somewhat dark 4 years in the Brazilian education, where we experienced the paradox of having schools being shut down in the process, and UNESCO has proved very important in the process of reopening schools following the pandemic, and we of course jointly took part in that process where schools were reopened following the pandemic. But the fact that schools were shut down for a given period also meant, on the other hand, that schools are now more greatly appreciated, because when schools were reopened, again, all of us, educators and society at large, began to see schools in a much more positive light and began to appreciate the value and the role of schools, and began to realize just how important schools are, for education and for socializing knowledge, not only for cognitive purposes in terms of actual learning, but also as regards a very important factor which has become an increasing source of concern and attention for us. I'm talking about human rights and the whole democracy agenda and the focus on those values that are cherished by our society. So I do think that we're currently going through a rather challenging point in time. Recently, schools were placed under threat, but at the same time, I think we find ourselves before an incredible opportunity. And speaking to you in particular, Professor Katia, let us seize the opportunity where schools are being appreciated to put our thinking caps on and reflect about our schools and their roles, and focus on a program to reinforce and build school leaders, especially teachers and principals, so that we can indeed go ahead and move towards this much needed change in the country. So I'm extremely pleased with the invitation, as I am here side by side with people whom I hold in very high regard. Professor Weinstein, a good friend whom I met in our meetings in Chile. So yes, it gives me great pleasure to join in this event. And with that, my Greetings to everyone, and I wish you will have a very productive discussion. Well, thank you, Professor Paim. According to the schedule, our next speaker and moderator will be Professor Jose Weinstein. He will be in charge of coordinating or moderating panel 1 of this discussion. Professor Weinstein, you have the floor.
um, only to when you see the book, which is a free access book, it's important to consider that it's a book that tries to give a sort of overview of the issue of school leadership. This is our main goal with Lara, to try to provide this ample vision and to cover different areas and dimensions of school leadership. When you read the book, you will see that they have some chapters that are dedicated to the theories of school leadership. Others are focusing the effects of school leaderships. Others are linking the issues of attraction or retention of the leaders in the schools. Others are with a specific link with all the aspect of training and preparation. Others chapters are of some more contemporary and modern theories in terms, for example, of the networks that the leaders need to bring together to work in the different areas, or in terms of the important role of the intermediate level, which is very crucial in terms of the municipalities or the states of the regions that also have a very important work and to create the conditions for a good leadership inside the schools. For this reason, we thought that it can be a contribution that give new evidence and knowledge, which is a very important international field. I want to add that in this book, we have original articles. That is, we invited more than 12 authors, 15 authors around the world of different countries, and we invite them to write a new article, original article. And in this article, some authors, and the majority of them, I think, try to establish some connection with the Brazilian situation. Sure, it's not an expert connection. You are the expert. You are the Brazilian. You know that more than us, that we come for other countries or include other regions of the world in the case of other authors. But sure, they have this vision to try to establish the connection and try to give some knowledge that can be useful for the Brazilian education. And that, I think, that also is important. And they have in the book one specific article about Brazil, which was written by Lara Simielli. And in this event, we will have two panels. One of them will be an international panel, and then we will move to a Brazilian panel. In this first panel, we will talk about three main issues. The first one will be the leadership and school improvement. The second one will be in terms of what is the importance of evaluation of the training and the work of school leaders. And the third one will be about the policies, educational policies, and what can be the contribution of these policies for the school leadership. The first talk, that will be around 12-15 minutes, will be given by Kobe Meyers. I really introduce some little words about Kobe, which is one of the authors of the book. Kobe studies system leadership, leading change, and a school turnaround or reform. And he's done all this work in terms of chief of research for the University of Virginia Partnership for Leaders in Education program. Kobe Meyers has written a lot of articles and books about this topic, but particularly I think that it's very interesting his view in terms of how we can turn around schools, how we can work to improve the quality and the work of a school that are particularly in troubles. And in this task, he has worked in different areas, but he is working particularly in partnerships, which name is Partnership for Leaders in Education, which is a joint venture between the University of Virginia and the School of Education and Human Development. And that, I think, is a very important area. We won't really hear your talks, and Kobe Meyers, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Jose, for pulling the book together. It was quite an endeavor, and I'm sure I didn't see the half of it on your side to actually make it come to life. Thank you to UNESCO and so many others. I don't even know who all to thank because there are so many people and so many moving pieces. I think, Jose, you said I have 12 to 15 minutes, which is great because I was planning on 10. I'll start a timer and then I'll take advantage of the extra couple of minutes maybe, because oftentimes academics get long-winded. Before I really jump into this presentation though, I also just wanted to say, as we think about school principals and the various perspectives that have already been shared, there's so much work that goes into being a school leader. The work is intellectual, it's intentional and planful, it's emotional, it's relational, and it's aspirational. I think there's no question that there's country context and there's local context, but to me, this is a human endeavor. And I really appreciated the framing around the sanctity of the school and the school building and its importance to the community, and the school leader in the role of not only trying to lead the school, but in being a partner with the community. And I just think that's so critical, regardless of where you are or what your school currently looks like. So the talk is Leadership for School Improvement. This is a high-level overview. And a lot of this research is going to be grounded in the United States, but I think that a lot of the practical implications of this review are relevant to local context in Brazil as well. I think there's a pretty clear body of literature worldwide showing that many of these things hold regardless of national or country context. So first of all, I just want to set the stage. The critical importance of the principle, I think there's little question. 2010 as well as 2006, this idea that if you really think about school improvement, especially any kind of rapid change in terms of student achievement at the school level, nothing really happens across a school without really good school leadership. And historically, it's possible that we've even undervalued the importance of the principle as we think about a ripple down effect, as Matt Clifford and others talk about. So this idea that the principal has fingers on so many aspects of what's happening in the school that often it's difficult to know and especially measure everything that's been happening or that the principal touches. More recently, and this is actually a report, a very comprehensive literature review that was conducted or published after I'd written the chapter for this book, but Jason Grissom and colleagues they argue through their deep review that the principal might actually be the most important school level factor in terms of student achievement. So for a long time, the argument has been that a teacher is the most important, and for good reason. The teacher is working directly with students, but obviously a teacher is also limited to one classroom at a time, whereas the principal has the potential to affect and impact all the teachers in a building. And again, this ripple down sort of effect. And so standards are increasingly comprehensive about what we want and expect and hope principals to be able to do in terms of leading. So when we think about the fundamentals of effective school leadership, so what are maybe the basics in some ways? What do we need principals to be able to do? In looking at this visual, first of all, a set of research in the US in the 70s and 80s in effective schools kind of gets you to that target. And then there's also this idea of improvement. And so these arrows kind of moving us somewhat linearly, right, towards the target. And it makes it look really smooth and easy. And of course, we know it's not. But some of the fundamentals have already been discussed, actually. So establishing and conveying mission and vision. Where is it we're going? How are we going to get there? And trying to bring a collective mindset with faculty, staff, as well as community around where we organizationally are trying to go. We're also trying to build professional capacity. So the building professional capacity, and there's an instructional element that runs throughout this. But building professional capacity, it also includes the use of data to be able to analyze and be responsive. It also includes bringing in teachers as well as others who fit that mission and the vision that's established. So it's an element of maintaining fit and identity and collectively moving towards those things. So we're also talking about creating a supportive organization for learning. This includes distributed leadership, thinking about how to be intentional and giving additional responsibilities as earned and as needed. Bringing in and facilitating high quality learning experience for students. I think we've already heard some today about differences potentially in expectations for students based on ethnicity, based on community. And I think the literature's really clear on this, that we have to have high expectations for all students and for all teachers, and that these differences, are not used as an excuse, as sometimes they are, when the achievement levels are not what we would hope. And then connecting with external partners, which was also touched on in some of the introduction. And external partners is, there's an array. Most naturally and most directly, we would be thinking about parents and family, but it also might include businesses or religious institutions or other sorts of organizations within a community that can help be responsive to student and family needs. So for example, I think earlier we were talking about food and the importance of being able to feed students. There's no question about how critical that is. In the United States, this was also very much highlighted during the pandemic, when a lot of schools became the primary provider of food services for a number of students. At the same time, although we need to tend to all of these societal needs, there also must be the maintaining of a focus on instruction and teaching and learning. And so how to leverage external partners in that work becomes really critical. And as I've said, we like to think about school improvement as a linear process, but as you can see with this change in the visual, what we know is oftentimes being a principal is the management of a number of things. It's ideas, it's schedules, it's goals and targets, And a lot of it requires people to be really fluid in their ability to handle various tasks and challenges, often in the same day. As Dr. Weinstein alluded, one of the areas that I've really spent a lot of time thinking about is in school turnaround, or really thinking about how to lead change, which is a little bit different. Previously, I just shared some of the fundamentals of good school leadership and kind of what needs to be happening. In school turnaround, at least in the US context, what this has become is the idea is that these are significantly underperforming schools by various measures, and they've been underperforming typically for a very long time. And so to actually change the trajectory requires potentially different skill sets. So for us, a principal in underperforming schools, they're going to need the fundamentals that we previously talked about, and they're going to be able to signal that change is necessary and creates momentum. I believe Secretary Akatia earlier spoke about a little bit about the building, what the building looks like, and is it welcoming, and those kinds of things. So oftentimes, typically underperforming schools start by actually changing what the facilities look like. That could be as simple as bringing in flowers and doing, painting the school, but something that shows that things here are changing and we have a new direction that we want to pursue. And you notice that at the end of these, I have and/or, because it's a list that continues to grow. It needs to be responsive to the actual school context and community context. And in that way, this next bullet, focusing on identifying root causes and responding directly to them. One thing that we find very often is that we as people, and principals are no different, have a tendency perhaps to identify the solution before they actually fully understand what it is they're trying to solve for. And so we have to be really intentional about digging into data, about talking to people strategically, and figuring out what actually are those root causes to be able to respond to those, to get the biggest response in teaching and learning. Oftentimes this person has to inspire faculty, students, and parents. They've typically had little success. They're used to, we know that a number of parents, they did not have good experiences as students themselves. And so then they might not be excited. They might actually even be scared about what school means to them. So this is a change. The faculty typically in such schools, they've experienced low student achievement. Perhaps they've come to blame the students. Maybe they don't believe in the students, etc. So there's an inspirational element to this about trying to change how people think about and engage in the educational experience. And so that requires balancing passion, compassion, and getting back to those high expectations and making those very solid throughout the building. Coaching, monitoring, and mentoring teachers, and helping them along the way with their instructional practices. And again, distributing leadership strategically based on mindsets, skill sets, and abilities. I do want to say just one other thing about the distribution of leadership. In school improvement, oftentimes schools are not very low performing. The distributed leadership becomes fairly natural, or it can. What we have found in significantly underperforming schools is the distributed leadership needs to be very intentional and strategic, and it needs to start with teachers and individuals that the principal can really rely upon and believe in to do the work. And then as faculty grow their strengths and capacities, then the distribution of leadership becomes more widespread. As I close out this brief talk, I want to return to this slide because I think this is really important. Dr. Weinstein noted that I work for the Partnership for Leaders in Education, and we really focus a lot on systems leadership issues. So if we look at this and we see each column of arrows as one school and one school's trajectory, in this case, a principal might be able to turn around and lead or facilitate change in one school. But obviously within a municipality, within a school district, there's still a number of other schools with similar challenges and problems. So as Marlova noted very early on in introducing this, I do have to at least mention that principals need support. They need ongoing learning. They need mentors and supervisors that can help them in their daily work to take on those leadership practices that might not be intuitive to them. As the esteemed secretary spoke to earlier, it's a matter of building over time. And so part of this conversation, I think, is also how do we help them do their jobs better? And I'm looking forward to listening to Dr. Orr talk some about the measurement and evaluation of those things. Thank you very much.
Or the book that is incredible because it's also about all this topic about the school improvement and the role of the leaders in this enormous challenges, particularly in difficult and complex context, social and cultural context. We will move to another chapter of the book, another author that we will invite in a sort of sample of the book to try to illustrate the type of element that are finally in the book with another topic, which is evaluation and assessment. And for that, we invited to the book to wrote a chapter to Margaret Terry Ord. Margaret is professor at Fordham University, also in the United States, as Covey Majors. And she works in the Fordham University. She has studied the area of assessment and evaluation for a long time and different topics. She's really an expert in this domain, and particularly in the Fordham University. She works as the EDD program director. She is director of the EDD program of this university. As you know, in the United States, they have this EDD, which is not, we don't have in general in Chile or in Brazil, which only we know the PhD as a sort of last level to preparation. But for the field of education in the state, they have this particularity, and which is the EDD. And Margaret Terry direct the EDD of this university. And also, she is the chair of the Division of Education, Leadership, Administration, and Policy of the University of Fordham. Margaret, the floor is yours. Thank you to be with us this day.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Thank you, Jose Weinstein and UNESCO and everyone who's here for the opportunity to have this conversation. Like Kobe, I'll try to time myself to be sure that I don't run over the time limits. And as you'll see, I'll be talking about the assessment of school leader readiness, and I'll be building on a lot of the remarks that have been said and really underscoring the importance of selecting and supporting qualified leaders for our schools, the need of which has been so well articulated already. What we know from prior work is that school leader appraisal is key to building better school systems and improving student outcomes. Yet the problem we have is knowing who is ready and able to lead schools, or who is effective as a leader, given the fact we have different pathways of how people get to school leadership. We have very different kinds of schools and settings, as was already articulated. And we have wide variation in our expectations and policies for leaders, and variations in how aspiring leaders are recruited, trained, and supported. We've already heard others talk about what are our primary expectations for school leaders. And I just want to underscore the importance of the areas that Dr. Myers already has articulated around setting direction, taking steps to reduce inequities in student learning and performance, the work principals do to supervise and support individual teachers to improve their effectiveness, but also the work that they do collaboratively with their school staff to improve student learning. And finally, how critical it is to engage family and community members to support students in the schools. When we think about what we have available to shape the readiness and performance of our school leaders, we know we have what we've done in the United States and other countries has been to establish standards and expectations for educational leadership, and then use these in thinking about how we recruit individuals into the pathway for school leadership, the steps we take to prepare school leaders and support them, and then finally what we do, how we assess to determine who's qualified and how we support them to continue to be effective. So what do we typically assess when we think about assessing school leaders? What we typically have done is we've assessed leadership knowledge. Like, do they know the areas that Dr. Myers outlined? Do they know what leadership practices are? We also assess leadership dispositions, such as around ethics and social justice. There are means of assessing leadership skills and practices, how well people are able to perform these, what's expected. And then measures of leadership effectiveness. How do we know that they're doing their job well? There are various tools and methods that we have available to make these assessments. In the United States, we have knowledge-based tests to test what school leaders know or aspiring leaders know about leadership practice. There are a series of disposition self-assessment inventories where people can evaluate their orientation to things like ethics. We have also come up with a series of problem-based assessments where aspiring leaders can tackle specific problems and demonstrate how they might approach them. There are also portfolio assessments in which aspiring leaders or even current leaders can put together evidence about the work that they have completed to demonstrate what they're able to do. There have been steps taken now to develop simulation-based assessments where people can run through specific scenarios in which they are asked to make various performance decisions and identify actions they might take. And in some places, there are assessment centers where rather than using a simulation, there might be a live action means of assessing readiness. More recently, there's been developments around performance assessments where aspiring leaders or current leaders are given specific tasks to complete in their work and provide evidence of what they're able to do. And finally, principal appraisal systems that might pull from these various elements in order to evaluate their performance. Having these tools and methods requires agreement on what leaders need to know and or be able to do. There also needs to be a system for data collection and analysis to support their use. And they require rating rubrics based on shared expectations about what is adequate or exemplary in readiness or performance. I'm going to give you two examples drawn from these tools that show a great deal of promise. The first comes from the Massachusetts Performance Assessment for School Leaders, which is used to evaluate who is ready for licensure in Massachusetts to become a school principal. I worked for many years on the development of this system, and it has proved to be highly effective in identifying and signaling who is ready to take on leadership positions. It consists of 4 performance assessment tasks that our aspiring leaders are required to complete. It begins with the area that Dr. Myers outlined, which is being able to demonstrate a vision for school improvement by developing plans around a particular problem or practice in the schools. A second is to demonstrate your ability to work with an individual teacher, evaluate their performance, and provide feedback on it. A third is to work with a group of teachers as a collaborative group to improve learning in a curriculum, instruction, or assessment area. And the fourth is to engage in activities to improve family and community engagement in the schools or in a particular area of support. These 4 tasks were developed based on Massachusetts leadership standards and indicators. In all 4 tasks, candidates are required to complete authentic work within their school setting, working with staff and leaders. Each of the tasks takes about 40 to 60 hours to complete. And to demonstrate what they've accomplished, candidates are to submit 3 to 4 artifacts and commentary as work products that document what they had done. The work is then scored using 3 to 4 rubrics with 6 to 8 indicators for each task. And using these rubrics, candidates are scored using a 4-point rating scale of beginning, developing, meeting, or exceeding expectation. Through our work, we have found that these performance tasks are flexible enough to be used at all school levels and in a wide range of schools and settings. And we found that those who perform well on this do better in terms of being advancing into leadership positions and being retained or promoted, and do better on other leadership evaluation measures. A second is to think about a principal evaluation appraisal system for current principals that might be based on something similar to the performance assessment, whereby principals would put together work products that are aligned to a prescribed area of work. And again, there will be rubrics to assess the validity and reliability of their decision-making. Such assessment systems can also incorporate input from other sources, such as teacher feedback surveys and supervisor appraisals. And finally, could also incorporate measures of school and student performance. So what might be of consideration to Brazil? One way to improve the qualifications of school leaders is to create and use a standards-based approach to assess leadership qualities that most contribute to improved student learning. And to use performance assessments and appraisal systems that can demonstrate leaders' skills in different schools and different settings. And to adapt these assessments to be used in how leaders are prepared, selected, and evaluated in their performance. Such a standardized assessment of school leader readiness would inform principal selection decision-making despite the differences that exist in how they're prepared, their technical qualification, and selection processes. And it could help clarify local, regional, or national priorities for leadership work and serve as an independent means of principal evaluation for comparison purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry Orr. Really interesting, and as you can see, Terry Orr, as other authors of the book, try at the end also to have this connection with the Brazilian reality, and not only to show what happens in the international arena, which is very important too, but it's important to know that. Finally, in this panel, I will show a specific chapter that we wrote with 2 colleagues, Chilean colleagues. And which is about one specific area that we think that also is very important. and it's the area of the policies. That is, we talk with the talk of COVID measures about the improvement process. We hear about the talk of Terrior about the assessment, but also it's important to complete what with others' visions of the point. And in this panel, we will share with us with you this area of the educational policies focus on leadership. And we did a specific analysis of 5 school systems, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, where we analyze this area of educational policies focused on school leadership. In the case of Argentina, and in the case of Brazil, is similar. It's difficult to have a sort of analysis of the entire system because they have so important differences between the province, because it's a decentralized system, that we need to analyze some of them. In the case of Argentina, we analyze the policies that are about this topic in the city of Buenos Aires and also in 4 select provinces. And in the other 4 cases, we analyze really the different the national policies that were in place, and we utilize a framework. The framework is the same that we had utilized around 10 years ago to analyze 8 educational systems for other studies that we realized with UNESCO. And in this case, in the past, 1 decade ago, we include Brazil, but we include one specific state of Brazil, which is Ceará, that we analyzed too. But we utilize the same framework, and I think that it's interesting to see the framework because it's a possibility to organize what are the main elements that must be considered when you analyze what a policy dedicated or a focus in the school leadership. The first thing is effectively what are the functions and the standard. What the systems demands to the school leaders? What are the roles that is important to do in the definition of the system? And in this definition, they have some functions, but also they have some standards where the functions must be done. And that is the first element, which is clearly relevant to define. The second one is the really powers or attributions that the school leaders have, which is not the same. To have a definition of the role, what is the real powers that the school leaders have? That is the second element, which is important to analyze, we think, in this framework. The third one is the selection process, which is the process of recruitment of the school leaders. Other one is the working conditions. What is the conditions to work that the system offers to the school leaders? In this area, you must think not only in terms of the salaries of this kind of things, but also in terms, for example, of the teams. What is the team that a school leader can have, a principal can have to work in his or her schools? And finally, all this area of training and support. What is the support that the system and the authorities give to the school leader? What kind of training that they propose or not? As you can see, for example, in the example that Terrior showed some minutes ago, they have some system in which, for example, to have some preparation is a requirement to be a school principal, and you must pass. You must jump an examination and then to be sure to be a school leader in these systems. But this is the framework. And with this framework, we analyze the 5 systems. And well, they have different, in the article, you can see that they have different lessons and ideas. But the main idea is that we have in a situation of the beginning of a story. In some countries, as the United States, but also in England or Australia, when a lot of other countries, really the function to be a school leader and to be a principal in terms of educational leadership has a long story, have decades and decades of work of that. In the case of Latin America, that we can see is that is the beginning of a story. We are a sort of a story in which, where in the main function of the school leaders is really not to leaders in the educational field, to be a sort of administrators, managers of the administration of our schools, but not to have the main task in terms of try to impulse a change in the education and to be involved in the pedagogical issues of the school. And for this reason, we put this idea of birth pains, that we are really in the beginning of the story. We are in all these moments that we can see some movement, but the movement clearly are some element at the beginning. And this idea, all this system, the 5 system, you can see elements of change. You can see that the subject is in the agenda, and they have the promotion of different initiatives. They have initiatives in terms of salaries. Some system put some kind of incentives to be principles that are important. You can see also initiatives in terms of the selection, trying to be more professional selection, and not so influenced by discretionary elements and political elements too. You can see also a lot of initiative in terms of preparation programs, with the new initiative to try to impulse the element of more involvement in the educational field by this area. You can see also in the different countries that they put in place some kind of standards. In some occasions that are not properly standards of work, but it is more a sort of framework of action. That is, they don't have a measurement of the standard, but they try to show the elements, that the tasks that are important that the school principal develops. This is the kind of element that we understand. And all these different measures and initiatives are under a sort of umbrella, and the umbrella is the discourse of professionalization. That is, that the system try to push that the school leaders has a professional work, and they have a role which is clearly distinguished to be a school teacher. But we, at the same time that we can analyze these elements of put in place a new reality, a new impulse for school leadership. Also, we can see different elements that challenge the 5 systems too. One of them is that they have a very broad and large definition of functions. That is, in some cases, you have more than 20 functions that the school leaders must done in principle. That is impossible that they can do all these things at the same time. The second element, in general, you have a gap between the functions and the real attribution and powers that the school leaders or principal have. That is, in general, they have a lot of attribution, but they don't have the powers to do that. And they have a gap there, which is very impossible to develop. The second element that we also saw in this different system, as we continue with the problems in terms of the selection process. That this is difficult to put in place a system which is very professional. in terms to really understand what are the main skills, knowledge, competencies that the school principal must have to be promoted to this position. And we continue with a lot of interferences in the system. The third one is that we don't have a real important progress in all the elements of the status of the principals, and particularly in terms of the working conditions, which is very important too. And in this point, an element which is very important is that they don't have teams and important teams in this country to have the possibility for the school principal to have a team where we can delegate and work together in the different function that is they must accomplish in the school. For example, in the majority of these countries and systems, they don't have a sort of person in this, a professional in this team, which is dedicated and focused specifically in the educational and pedagogical arena. In Brazil, you have that with the consejero pedagógico, but it's not the case of the majority of this thing, or they don't have someone which is dedicated of the administrative area and this kind of thing. And the last lesson that we can discover in this element, they have in the training that they have a lot of initiatives. They have really a very important increase in the amount of training, but this majority in terms of quantity, but they don't have really a focus in terms of the quality of this training. And that we can show is that the majority of this training is not analyzed or designed in terms of some new element that is crucial for the quality. For this reason, we arrive at the conclusion that they have a very important and massive training, but without enough quality. They have obviously some exceptions, but this is the main thing. That is the main vision of this policy analyzed with this framework. And under this diagnosis of the advance and strengths and at the same time challenges and weaknesses, we think that we have at least these 5 elements, which is important to think in terms of our Latin American educational system. The first one is that we have, in general, they have an incomplete diagnosis of the situation. We have a lack of knowledge of what is really the situation of our school leaders. And this is a very important problem when you think in terms of have a good policies, that you don't have the knowledge of that, and you don't have enough research about our specific thing. The second one, which is very linked with the other, is that we because we don't have this specific knowledge, we try to copy some other policies that are in place in other parts of the world. And we have this problem, which is well known in terms of the policy borrowing, that we put in place some programs and ideas without really know if they are pertinent to our reality. The third one is that we have a very important problem in terms of the infrastructure for change, that we don't have the capacities in a lot of institutions to do this problem. For example, when I talk about all this area of training, well, we don't have capacities in the institution to give a better training, and that is a very important problem. Other point which is relevant is that all these policies in general have a lack of political support, that is to impulse the empowerment of the school principals is not the real interest of some very important actors. It's not in some occasion the real interest of the teachers' unions. That in some say that, but how this school principal will have more power and can have some elements of power in relation with us, teachers. And that's an important obstacle in some cases. Other are the local powers in the administration that also think that can lose some powers if the school principal are empowered and have more functions. For this reason, and at the same time, the school principal don't have organization and a political voice. And that is another important point. And finally, we think that the main problem is really the problem of coherence and sustainability of the policies. That is, they don't have a coherence between the different elements of the policy. I show you this framework. Well, we don't have coherence between the functions and standards and, for example, the selection process, or the functional standards and the training process. And that is a very important element, that this lack of coherence of the work initiatives, but without this order and complementarity. And also the other very important element, which is not only for educational and school improvement, sure, which is the problem of sustainability. That is, each administration arrive with new topics, new policies, and they don't have an accumulation in terms of the policies. That is the main thing of the article. And finally, I will say that this analysis arrived to us to the conclusion of this idea that we need to reinvent some policies to Latin America, and in the case to Brazil, we think that is the same. That is not to ignore the situation and the knowledge that is accumulating in the world. This is the reason of the book. But at the same time, to be alert that we need to adapt it and have some changes. For this reason, I put this very beautiful poem of the Spanish poet Antonio Machado. But you know, it's in Spanish. I think that you can read and understand them. But the most important thing is this idea that the work of a person, of a country, is not decided a priori. It's necessary to walk and to discover our travel. This idea of caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar, that Antonio Machado said. Thank you, and and with that we finish this. With the first panel. Thank you, Rebecca, for this opportunity. Thank you, Terbior and Kobe Meyers, to join us and to have a sort of first taste of this book that is possible that you can read now for the support, because the support of UNESCO.
Sem dúvida, muito obrigado, professor.
Absolutely, Professor Weinstein. Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank all of the other panelists as well. This has been a wonderful panel in that it has brought to the fore a number of key factors and elements, including evaluation, roles, functions, and a number of different points regarding school leadership, as well as, of course, the very important challenges for our discussion. I think the panel brings to the fore the elements we need to feed into and design public policies in Brazil focused on even better, increasingly better school leadership. When I introduced panel one, I failed to mention that Professor Jose Weinstein is co-editor of the book School Leadership, and also Professor de Diego Portales University in Chile, where he also directs the educational leadership program at the education school. He is a sociologist, has a degree from the University of Chile and a doctoral degree from the University or Catholic University of Louvain in Belgium. The publication we are launching today on school leadership brought together 15 different subject matter experts from different countries in a number of very interesting articles. I recommend you read them all. The publication is available free of access, or the access is free of charge, totally available. You are welcome to download it through the UNESCO website. I understand the link is available on the UNESCO website. I do recommend you read the articles because, as you could see from this brief walkthrough, the articles and the issues that are addressed are extremely interesting and relevant. With that, we come to the second and last panel of this morning. I'd like to invite our guest speakers to talk about school leadership from their perspective and experience. To moderate this panel, may I invite Ms. Lara Simiali, professor of the Public Management Department of the Getúlio Vargas Foundation and also co-author of the book School Leadership, Directors as Key Factors for Transforming Education in Brazil. Professor Simiali is a master and doctor in public administration and government from the FGV Foundation, served as a visiting researcher at the Education School in Stanford University, currently a professor and researcher at the Getúlio Vargas Foundation on matters pertaining to planning and management in the government sector, educational policy, and equity affairs. I'd like to, of course, thank the guest speakers of panel one, and without further ado, may I give Lara the floor to moderate the discussions and presentations in panel two. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca, and good morning, one and all. It gives me great pleasure to join you for the launch of this book on school leadership. I'd like to start out by voicing my thanks to some of the people in the organization who have brought this idea to fruition, especially, and first of all, UNESCO, which has been our partner from day one in this publication, particularly Marlova, who spoke in the opening session, and also the education sector. Rebecca, Lorena, you have been our partners and colleagues working hand in hand in this effort since 2011. May I also thank Jose Weinstein, who has been a very generous partner in my experience in school leadership. Paula Lozano, likewise, she was responsible for the seminal contacts between the foundation and the University of Chile, and also the researchers who drafted the original unpublished articles for this book, especially reflecting the Brazilian context, particularly Terry Orr and Colby Myers. And finally, may I also thank the other subject matter experts and friends likewise who agreed to take part in this event and share their perspective on the book. Thank you, Payan, Katia, Raquel, Juliana, Rosemary. Thank you so much. I'd also like to dedicate this book to all of the 150,000 school principals, both men and women out there in Brazil, who are doing their best. They're doing actually more than their best. They're doing more than they can actually to take care of Brazilian schools on a day-to-day basis. In this panel two, in my opening remarks, I thought of sharing with you the pathway that preceded the idea of developing this book. About 4 years ago, I started this tentative review of the Brazilian literature on school management. As part of the literature review, I came across about 700 articles on school management in Brazil published since 1989, in the past 30 years. In a brief review of those findings, I would like to highlight 3 key points. Point 1 is the fact that in all of this literature review, only 6% of the articles found did specifically look into the role of school principals in Brazil, a very low percentage of the publication. So out of all of those articles, we came across only a very low percentage focused on school principals. Point number 2 is about the important learning curve and the body of knowledge that has accrued in Brazil regarding democratic management. It is really notorious just how much research has been underway and the number of researchers who have devoted their time and attention to, of course, address the matter from that perspective, which I believe is extremely important for us in Brazil, given the fact that the matter is so central on the agenda. I mean, the participatory processes within the school setting. Accordingly, I think it is fair to say that Brazil has a very positive factor about it, which is the broad array of research projects that provide an underpinning or a foundation to policy designs and practices aimed at ensuring a more democratic school style in Brazil. Point number 3 I thought I'd highlight is about the fact that some Brazilian researchers have spotted out the need to introduce new themes and the new outlook for school management in Brazil, as well as the use of new methodologies to review or analyze the phenomena that take place within the schools. So not only novel topics and themes and outlooks, as well as new research methodologies. I mentioned only 3 topics of interest, but if you're interested in furthering your views and understanding, there's this one article I published in the periodical called Cadernos de Pesquisa, Research Notebooks, which provides a fully fledged survey of the literature review I conducted focusing on school principles. So having gone through that first stage where I focused on the domestic literature and papers focusing on school principles, I thought it would be important to add more to the analysis by understanding how the Brazilian research projects on school management talks to the international literature on the matter at hand. So to that end, I started out by reviewing the publications by Brazilian researchers published in international periodicals. So if you go back in time, 7 years ago, you will find no more than 5 articles published by Brazilian researchers in periodicals cataloged in Scopus, which is an academic database for scientific articles, among more than 60 different research projects published by Latin American researchers. So that was a finding or conclusion reached by Heilinger, quoting them. And the conclusion is, of course, that there are very few articles drafted by Brazilian researchers published in international periodicals. And Brazil has a very low percentage presence, even vis-a-vis other Latin American researchers. Of course, Latin America is a specific context marked by several unique features, as mentioned by Rosé. And the next thing I did was to review the main works or publications quoted or cited by Brazilian researchers in their publications in Brazil. In other words, I wanted to find out the, say, benchmark references that were used in Brazilian research papers on school management. In such a review, one finds a strong trend to cite Brazilian works and papers, and very little reference to even other researchers from Latin America, from Portuguese-speaking countries, or from the South geographies. So among the references found in these articles, and I did check all of them and I did review all of them, I could not, however, find any reference to any work in, say, my list of references that is among the most cited works on school management in the world. As of 2010, however, we begin to see a new change in the overall trend where Brazilian researchers and papers begin to refer or cite international references more specifically, although it was a localized trend, not a widespread trend in the area. There's also the trend of seeing new references, particularly by Portuguese researchers who publish in Brazilian periodicals in the past few years. So these are the trends we have found in the literature review. And this survey is actually the last chapter of the book we're launching today. So if you're interested, you can find further and a deeper connection between the reading references and the most cited international works, if you would like to further your review. And the reason why I drafted that chapter and the reason why I'm saying this is because I want to share with you the primary purpose of this book. The primary purpose being to, of course, bring to the fore internationally relevant topics which remain nevertheless not very widely disseminated domestically in Brazil. So the idea was to bring together 15 international experts, idea, of course, led by Jose and myself, subject matter experts on school management and leadership who were invited to draft articles which were later translated into Portuguese with, of course, the institutional support by UNESCO. And of course, Terry, Orr, and Myers are, of course, among the authors invited to draft articles for the book. So given the above, and with that introduction in mind, I'd like to invite 3 subject matter experts who have been kind enough to accept our invitation to join us in this launch event today so that they can lead us in a discussion on the topic at hand. So to start out the panel, I'd like to introduce you to Raquel Teixeira, a dear friend of mine and also education secretary with Rio Grande do Sul. She was born in Goiânia, Midwestern Brazil. She has an extensive career of services provided in the field of education. She has a master's and PhD in linguistics from Berkeley. She has an undergraduate degree in languages and linguistics from the University of Brasilia. She has a postdoc in language and culture from the Advanced Studies in Paris, and also a specialization program from the Federal University of Goiás, Brazil. In the past 20 years, she has served as Secretary for Education, Science, and Technology, and also Secretary for Culture and Citizenship Affairs, as well as Sports Affairs in the Midwestern state of Goiás. Has also served as council member with the National Education Council and federal representative for the state of Goiás for 8 years, and also coordinator of the São Paulo Education or Teacher Training and Development School. Thank you so much for that introduction, Lara. Good morning, one and all. I'd like to start out by thanking you for the opportunity to join you in this exchange of views and experience. And may I also say that the book that UNESCO, Lara Simielli, Joseph Einstein have offered us is really a gift. It's to be taken as a door open as part of a pathway that we're really tapping into in Latin America and in Brazil in particular. A door, if you understand the metaphor, which I believe many people will walk through. I had actually prepared, say, high-level comments about the book, which I will skip, given time constraints. But I must say that I thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. I have read it all in its entirety, and I strongly recommend you also read it. All of you attending this session, and my special and warm regards to the school principals in Brazil's southernmost state who may be with us at this point. I'm actually going to be sharing the link to the book to all school principals. I will also be saying a few words about my personal experience. I also have a few slides that I have prepared and which I will cover very briefly. Can you help me? Can you share those slides for us or for me, please, Renato? As we wait for Renato to prepare these slides, may I also say that I did serve as Secretary for Education in the state of Goiás for the first time back in 1999. Much to my surprise, however, the first visit I got in that capacity was by a team of chairpersons of political parties with a notarized document in their hands. They made a point of stressing that the document they had in their hands was a notarized document reflecting the consensus on the part of the political parties that had supported the governor in that elections about school principals. A clear-cut list. Such and such schools should be covered by such and such party. Schools A, B, C, or C, D, F should be covered by another party. And that was supposed to be a list I should comply with according to their suggestions. So the first thing I thought I should do was to hold a meeting among school directors or school principals. The governor agreed, despite, of course, the political deterioration of his political coalition. A first election was conducted back in 1999, and little by little we were able to improve the electoral process by means of training and professional development courses. May I also call to mind something Lara refers to in her article when she distributes or divides up Brazilian academic production in three stages: 1999, 2000, 2001, 2012, when I served as Secretary for Education in Goiás and served as President of the National Education Council. The main influence we had under that period was from Heloisa Luque from the Federal University or the Catholic University of Paraná, and her papers on democratic management. She was an advisor to the council at the time, and we launched the first school manager program, the Progestão program, which of course was disseminated throughout Brazil. When I came down to Brazil's southernmost state, Rio Grande do Sul, I found a fully consolidated election system in place and the democratic management style also duly in place. I got here in 2001 and the elections were held that same year. Next slide, please. We then took the initiative to, next, please. Yes, next, please. I'm going to skip all of these slides, the first slides, given time constraints. Next, please. I want to focus on our experience here in Brazil's southernmost state. At that point in time, the national shared matrix for school principal skills and competencies had just been published. So that included primary training as well as ongoing training. So what we saw at the time was a alignment on the training profile recommended by the National Education Council, as recommended by the Brazilian recently enacted legislation on the matter. And based on that document, and by the way, that first document addressed 10 general competencies or skills, 17 specific competencies, 95 job duties or skills, divided up in 4 different dimensions. Number 1, the political/institutional dimension, the pedagogical dimension, the financial administrative dimension, as well as the personal/relational dimension to the profile. For the state of Rio Grande do Sul, we hired the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul to teach us a specialization course and program including 375 hours. And the course was completed, the module was completed back in March this year. And the school principals have up until June to submit their final paper. And the course is structured, as you can see, according to these different circuits and arrows. Circuit 1, meaning I am currently a director. What about now? Circuit 2, moving from principal to manager. Circuit 3 on school, or rather equitable and inclusive school management. Circuit number 4, moving from school manager to school leader. And circuit 5, school leadership and community leadership. In other words, in this course module or training module, we try to reflect much of what is addressed in the book in terms of the school manager, the school principal, the school administrator, and the leadership skills that are required. The training module was offered to 6,208 school principals and deputy principals in the Rio Grande do Sul State Education Network. And 800 Brazilian reals, about $180 were granted every month for school principals and also to the deputy principals, because it was a specialization module that required a lot of time. So the state acknowledged their effort by granting them this allowance, financial allowance, to implement all of this in practice. We summed up those 10 general competencies and the 17 specific competencies plus the 95 skills. We summed them all up into 9 competencies as part of this, say, skills or competences matrix, covering 3 skills in each area of interest. And these competencies we try to foster and develop among our staff members included inspirational leadership, collective construction, diversity, equity, and inclusion, assertive communication, strategic vision, people management, focus on learning, and resource management. These competencies or skills very much summarize the ultimate contents of the book. So I couldn't be more pleased with the book. I do wish to keep on enhancing our experience as discussed here today. Next, please, Renato. I thought I would briefly share this final diagram or table with you, because with support from Vector Brazil, we were able to map out the capabilities or competences or skills that are available to teachers in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. Interestingly enough, when you look at it, collective construction is the most developed skill or competence among our school principals in Rio Grande do Sul, very much probably the result of democratic training or democratic participation efforts. And then people management, followed by assertive communications, followed by resource management, as well as diversity, focus on learning, diversity, equity, focus on learning, ranking number 5th. Number 7, innovation. Number 8, inspiring, inspirational leadership. And number 9, strategic vision. I believe this ranking also very much reflects our track record and our background training experience. I'd like to call your attention to the fact that the mapping exercise and the evaluation we conducted show that principals working in low social economic performances perform below the average in all competences or skills tested. And this is just the result of some of the evaluations. I think you can close the PowerPoint, Renato. and the given time constraints, as I said before, I tried to very swiftly, in no more than 3 or 4 minutes, I tried to cover the work we have conducted recently. And of course, we plan to enhance it in as much as we intended to be available for customized professional development in upcoming courses in the pipeline. And also it will serve as a yardstick regarding the competencies and skills that we wish to make in the near future. And of course, I'd like to launch an invitation to all researchers who are with us today. You're most welcome to study the Rio Grande do Sul case, because we want to add an element of intentionality to, of course, follow up on the work and efforts we are currently conducting. Thank you so much, Lara.
Thank you, Secretary Raquel. And right now, I would like to call Juliana Rosner, who is the Secretary of Education for the city of Vitoria, the capital city of the state of Espírito Santo. She is a master on teaching humanities for the Federal Institution of Education of the state. She works as a pedagogical coordinator and also has a degree on pedagogy, focusing on school counseling. Currently, she is the Secretary of Education for the city of Vitoria, but she was an administrator for the Joanes José do Nascimento School and also worked as a coordinator for youths and children for the Municipal Bureau of Education from the city of Cariacica. She also worked as a teacher trainer. I hand it over to Secretary Juliana. Lara, it is such a joy to be here and to participate on this UNESCO event. And it's also great to hear from the experts, hear from Katia and all the colleagues. She speaks as schools as being a sacred ground, and I couldn't agree more. And I really believe that is a territory for disseminating knowledge and the right for learning and to guarantee quality public education for everyone. And it's also important to mention that the agenda of school administrators are so relevant in this current period in time. We are saying that the roles of these leaders are essential, and it's I'm just so grateful for that research, all the colleagues for bringing forth this scenario as far as what is happening abroad in terms of academic research, what is already known as science. We don't have to learn everything on trial and error. You just cannot do this with education. And I speak from the perspective of our city. We work with 3 schools. We take care of 42,000 students, and I know that this is a small city compared to others. I mean, Katia was talking about her responsibilities overseeing almost 500 schools. So when you stop and think about the trajectory of Brazilian educators, we are thinking about the perspective of going to bed as teachers and waking up as principals. And you wake up with such a responsibility. You're seen as a leader. And as of this moment forward, you are taking care of so many pillars, as it was mentioned by the authors and our colleagues before. And I used to joke that as a principal, I felt as though I was a juggler. You know, you have to cater to the communities, to families, to the financial department. You have to oversee the care of our students. You have to promote a healthy environment. And we talk about the culture of families and parents, but we have to focus also on making the school a democratic place. And it's hard to keep all those, to juggle all of those elements. At times, you will drop something and you have to bring it back on the loop and start working again, because schools are like machines to where they depend on different moving parts. You cannot have a loss of connection. You need to have a professional demeanor when you work as a leader. So what you are presenting us today with this book is the possibility of disseminating knowledge, the very cutting edge knowledge, what is out there in terms of research for leaders, for school leaders, and for us as the people responsible. We need to have that scientific backing. So I want to congratulate all of the organizers. In all seriousness, I believe in it as an educator and as the Secretary of Education. I believe that school administrators have a real impact on the learning process for our children. They have a real impact when it comes to the space to the school as an embracing, welcoming space, a space which will not foment any violence, a space that will promote anti-racist education, a space that will not allow for bullying, will not allow for homophobia, and will not allow for any sort of violence or any suffering to anyone in any shape or form. And for those school administrators, they need a technical support. And with these tools, they can adjust and mediate those conflicts. And of course, we know we are tight on time, but I want to tell you that working as a principal, the subsecretary at the time said that the school looked like the principal. And I was very upset when I took over because the school was very poor in its infrastructure. And I said, no, I refuse to accept that the school looks like the principal. And today I work as the secretary, and I have to repeat this publicly in an event that is as distinguished as this one. I really have to agree that the school is the principal, because a principal gives his or her intention. If one is very assertive, very much of a goal-getter, if they like a colorful school, if they like a dialogue, if they like to promote these spaces, the school will absorb that. So, as it was very well put by the researcher, it used to be only about the teacher, and the teacher would coordinate different classes. And we know that in Brazil, the same teachers will work on different schools. And that teacher's attitude is strongly influenced by the principal. So the school administrator has a real impact on the climate of the school, on the culture of that school. And this is going to impact all across the board. So, yes, I want to speak about co-responsibility so that Brazil can really put this high on our agenda. School administrators have a very specific technical knowledge. There is a necessity to have a continuous training process. And by the way, congratulations to Raquel. And I'll tell you, we have to have a conversation. I really liked what you showed us in this very brief period of time, but that's what we require. And I'm glad that we made some strides. We have some new agreements that are now putting forth a quality perspective for the administrators. We heard from the beginning of Lara's career, and today we have more of a structure. You need to focus on the quality criteria, but how can we go beyond that? How can we go a step further if we consider our 5,400 cities in Brazil? How can we reach everyone and bring good quality school administration? And this is excellent work. It's excellent to have a webinar like this one, which is going to be made available to everyone. I'm definitely going to post on my social media and our network, because we want to inspire people to do it better and do it differently. We have an ethical commitment with each student, each adult, each youth that is part of our schools, and they are entitled, they have the right of a quality public education. Thank you so much for the opportunity of being here with you today. Thank you so much, Juliana. Thank you for your words. And at this point, we're going to hear from the last panelist, last but not least, of course. I want to hand it over to Rosimeire Santos Guerra, the principal of a state school called Adeon Hilário Sauer in the city of Itabuna, state of Bahia, northeastern Brazil. Rosimeire comes from that city. She graduated in the University of Santa Cruz. She is specialized on school management. She has worked with the Bahia University, and she also works with English school teaching. She works in that with the Virtual University of São Paulo. She participated on a training process by the National College in Nottingham in the UK, and she is an administrator at the Adeon Sauer School since 2009. And this is a school that has been awarded with several prizes, with several recognitions throughout the years. So it's a pleasure to have you here with us, Rosimeire. You have the floor. Good morning, everyone. Greetings to you, Lara. Thank you so much for the invitation. I was so touched, as was our team, when we got this invitation from you. And it's great to hear everything that was said by all the colleagues, all the authors that have participated in this publication with a broad international experience. And right out of the gate, I was curious with the title, because from time to time, people will use nomenclature, such as principals, such as administrators or managers. And at this moment, we are speaking about school leaders. Managers in and by themselves, they cannot do it all. But school principals, just like we heard before, is an essential part that will connect all of the other axes, all the other pillars. So when I got this publication, I was eager to read every chapter. And on chapter 1, I came across the concept of manager and leader. So Tony Bush, he talks about the National College for Teaching and Leadership. And I was actually there for 30 days. I did this exchange program and I represented my state. And I said, my gosh, I'm so glad that they mentioned the National College here, because this is where we had a lot of experience. 26 states were represented there from 26 Brazilian states, and we were able to share some successful experience with dozens of schools. And when I saw each chapter and each element being described here in the publication, I was so elated, because this is really a gift. This is a gift that UNESCO is bestowing everyone, and you are giving this to the school sector, to school leaders in Brazil. Not that we don't have successful practices in our country, we definitely do, but there is not a lot of literature, as it was said before, and there is not a lot of dissemination of those successful practices. Just like we heard from the Secretary of Rio Grande do Sul, Progestão was a program that was disseminated all over the country. I was a part of it. And as a school administrator, I focused on chapter 8 from Colby, who is here. And he says that ideas for schools, I'm paraphrasing, but it's tough to act as a leader. And I come from this background, from a difficult school, because in 2009, I stepped in as the manager for that school. That school didn't have credibility. The structure was very poor. It was in terrible condition. And as it was said, the school looks like the principal, right? The school is the principal. And I said, there you go. They put me to work on this school as a principal. How am I going to turn this around? Well, the first step was to humanize the space, was to give life to the school, was to choose each and every segment and allocate the right people and listen to everyone. Is about active listening. It's about an institutional reform, and all of those elements are so clear on the book. This is a real gift for Brazil. If our state secretaries embrace it, if they take this training based on the book, it'll be great. Not that this is the ready-made recipe for every single person, but it's definitely a guidance. This is a pathway that you can undertake, and according to your local reality, you can adjust it and have a dialogue with your peers. And from this content, you can affect transformation, because education is about including people, is about enabling our students to dream. And when you start working from this book, which is a guidance, which is a light at the end of the tunnel, which shows you, gives you the tools, shows you how to do it, and makes you reflect, makes you think about it. What can you do for your community? How can you improve the outcome of your school? And how can you add on to your teachers? How can you include family members? How can you give a voice and give an opportunity for the students? How can you shape the school based on those principles? And I can tell you, the Secretary of Education here in our state and our minister, Professor Geronimo, who works with us, all of them do that in our state. They enable us to be autonomous, and they give us a broad range of options and some key projects that bring to the school an opportunity to train our staff, not only the teaching staff, but also our family members and our students. Because when all the segments are working together, as it is quite clear in the book, education will be the driving force of this country, and it will transform realities. Thank you so much for your words, Rosemary. We talked about it, and your management style is so inspiring to all of us. To conclude the panel, I just want to share with you that we are organizing our structures, starting with the state level, all the way to municipal level, all the way to the principal level. We think about aligning public policies from a macro to a micro level. We chose 3 administrators that are deeply inspiring to us. So I want to say thanks yet again. Thank you to Raquel, Juliana, and Josimeire. Thanks for being here in this launch of ours. And Rebecca, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you. Thank you, Lara. Congratulations, kudos on the great panel. I think that was a very interesting panel that touched on numerous perspectives in terms of leadership, in terms of transforming our schools, making it more inclusive, making it more equitable, and also the perspective for principals in terms of the Bureau of Education. I think it's really important, and I'm so glad to listen from Josimeire, saying that she has read the book, she's going to use it. Definitely, this is really outstanding to us. It's really great because this book was made for you. It was made for you, the principals, everyone that is watching. This book is for you. Be sure to download it, disseminate it, share it. And I would also like to say that UNESCO is available to all the school principals, to all of the bureaus of education. And we already have a partnership with Rio Grande do Sul, the southernmost state in Brazil. We also have a partnership with the state of Bahia, with girls and young women on informatics. These are our partners, but we are definitely open for further partnerships. I would also like to inform each and every one of you that this webinar will be is being recorded and it will be made available at the UNESCO Portuguese website. And this is already available for download. The publication is already available for download as well. On the YouTube chat, we sent all the required links so that you can disseminate and get the word out. Be sure to let everybody know about the publication and the webinar. I think it was a very rich discussion. Thank you to all our panelists, especially the 2 main people that coordinated this effort. I'm talking about Laura and Professor Jose Weinstein, and also all the authors that dedicated to write their chapters here. And UNESCO takes a while because we have a number of publications, so sometimes it takes us a while to elaborate and finalize our publications because there is a very high number of papers being published. But I think this is great timing. I think it's a great opportunity to launch this release for you in this webinar. So I do hope you make good use of it. Thank you so very much